Section 28 of the Labor Act 11 of 2007. This section deals with the provision of accommodation. In this section, when it mentions the word dependent, it means the spouse and the dependent children of the employee or of the spouse. So it's the dependents of the employee themselves or the dependent of either their wife or their husband. So in terms of this section, if an employee is required to live at the place of employment or to reside on any premises owned or leased by the employer, that employer must provide the employee with adequate housing, including sanitary and water facilities. So that employment house or employment flat must contain proper sanitation and water facilities. In terms of this section, if an employee referred to that lives on that accommodation lives on an agricultural land, the employer must provide sufficient facilities referred to in subsection 2, meaning they must provide proper sanitation and water facilities to meet the reasonable needs of the employee and the employee's dependent. But also on top of that, if it's on the farmland, they must permit the employee to keep livestock and to cultivate land to meet the reasonable needs of that employee and that employee's dependents, or in terms of an agreement with the employee, provide the employee with sufficient food to meet the reasonable needs of the employee and the employee's dependent. Or if they can't enter into that agreement, then they must cover that in payment by making additional payment to the employee in order for the employee to be able to meet the needs of themselves and their dependents. An employer who terminates the employment of an employee who is required to live at the place of employment or to reside on any premises owned, leased, or provided by the employer may not require the employee to vacate the said premises or place unless, in the case of an employee residing on agricultural land, the employer gives to the employee 3 months written notice to vacate. So when you live in an accommodation that is provided by your employer, then you are entitled to 3 months of notice to vacate that accommodation. In the case of all other employees, the employer gives to the employee at least 1 month's written notice to vacate. So if it's an agricultural land, then it's 3 months. And if it's any other employment, then it's 1 month of notice. And it only makes sense because if you have cattle on this farmland that you must also move, then it is required that you would take more time compared to when you're based in town, when you basically just have to move from one flat to another without any moles. If an employee has referred a dispute to the Labor Commissioner alleging unfair dismissal within 30 days following the termination of employment, the employer may not, despite subsection 4, require the employee to vacate the place or premises until the dispute is resolved in terms of Part G of this chapter or otherwise disposed of. So the 3 months notice in terms of agricultural employees and the 3 months notice and the 1 month notice in terms of any other employee to vacate the premises does not apply when the employee has referred a dispute to the Labor Commissioner. In this case, that employee is not required to vacate the premises until that dispute that is referred to has been resolved in terms of Part G of this chapter or otherwise disposed of. So they have to stay in that premises until it ends, even if they have been dismissed or the employment has been terminated. For as long as they have filed a dispute, then they are entitled to stay in that premises until the dispute is resolved. Thank you. Let us discuss, let us engage. This is a very interesting one as well. So thank you. Comment, like, share, subscribe, and engage. That's mostly important, to engage. Let's learn from each other. Thank you.